Over the past week, Russian troops conducted a series of strikes on enemy facilities on the territory of Ukraine. In Chernihiv, the Profsoyuzhnaya Hotel, where the AFU Temporary Deployment Center was located, was hit. In Dnipro, the warehouses of the Himpromsoyuz enterprise came under fire, where several fires broke out. The airport where the Ukrainian aviation is based was also hit. Some of the airplanes received significant damage. Another target of the attack was a Ukrainian air defense positioning area located in the neighboring village of Lyubimivka. A precision hit destroyed a S-300 launcher, a guidance radar, and a combat control cabin. In the occupied part of the DPR, a missile strike hit a service station in Pokrovsk. The facility was used to service and repair AFU vehicles and other light vehicles. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces launched 12 ATACMS, operational tactical missiles, at the Crimean Peninsula. Some of the munitions were intercepted, but the rest damaged the airfield infrastructure in Jankoy. At the end of the week, the AFU launched several dozen drones across various regions of Russia. In the Bryansk region, the enemy attacked the Novobryanskaya 750 substation, where a fire broke out. At the same time, fierce fighting continued in the Special Operations Zone on several sections of the front. In the North Ukrainian direction, the AFU was engaged in the construction of fortifications and anti-tank barriers on the border. In the Slobozhansk direction, the enemy was building several defense lines on the northern approaches to Kharkiv. At the same time, the AFU mined bridges on possible routes of the Russian troops' offensive. On the Kupiansk-Svatove direction, counter-battles continued in the area of Sinkivka and Sverdlivka. And at the Ivanivka-Kyslivka line, Russian troops destroyed several AFU strongholds and managed to advance slightly. In the Lyman direction, the sides fought positional battles on the Yampolivka-Terny line. Ukrainian forces concentrated their efforts on holding their positions and practically did not undertake any counterattacks. In the Siversk direction, there were position battles on the approaches to the chalk pit east of Bilohorivka. At the same time, assault units of the Russian armed forces attacked AFU positions in the area of the Popasnyansky water filtration station. On the Bakhmut direction, Russian troops were advancing on the eastern outskirts of Chasiv Yar and stormed the building near the 77th school. The enemy carried out chaotic mining of terrain on possible attack routes of the Russian armed forces units. In the Avdiivka direction, Russian servicemen continued to develop success in several areas throughout the week. On the northern phase, the Russian armed forces units reached the northern outskirts of Ocheretino and began to storm the AFU positions near Zhelezhnodorozhnaya Street. To the south, Russian forces have established control over most of Semenivka, but the enemy still maintains a presence on the northern outskirts. At the same time, Ukrainian forces hold the western part of Berdichi, from which the Russian armed forces assault teams had to withdraw earlier. At the same time, Russian units continued their offensive at the Umanske, Yasnobrodivka line. Fierce fighting took place in the wooded areas on the approaches to the road connecting the two localities. To the north of Donetsk, Russian AFU servicemen have begun to eliminate a pocket in the area of the Domaka beam. And west of Pervomaiskoye, Russian troops tried to advance towards Netailovo. Also in the Donetsk direction, Russian troops continued advancing on the southern and eastern outskirts of Krasnohorivka. Russian armed forces soldiers established control over most of the private sector south of the railroad, and also gained a foothold in the area of the railroad station. On the Vuhledar direction, Russian units were fighting in Novomikhailivka and the vicinity. There were reports about the liberation of the settlement, but so far the enemy at least maintains control over the western outskirts of the village. In the Vremivka direction, the sides were still fighting at the line of Priyutne Staromayorske Novodonetske. The Russian troops carried out targeted strikes on positions and places of concentration of Ukrainian forces. On the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russian armed forces held positions in Rabotinyo and fought northeast of Verbov. The enemy also made several attacks on Inner Hodar and Tokmak, where significant damage was avoided thanks to anti-aircraft gunners. In the Kherson direction, the AFU maintained control over the bridgehead in the central part of Krinky. Throughout the week, the enemy increased the number of UAVs for both strikes against the AFU and the delivery of materiel.